a chazor of the Maimir. So the Maimir begins with the Shailis. Why does he start Yitnu? What's the answer for Yitnu? There are two answers at the end for Yitnu. Number one, anybody? It goes, Zeh means it's something revealed. So the Avodah is in the Nefesh Bahamis, which is conscious. Then at the end, they give another answer to Zeh Yitnu. That's in the Sinas Koyach that comes for this Avodah. Moreover, there was an association with Zeh Kilevi Aveyu and the Rishalmi that notes the connection between the Machs HaShaka, where it says Kol HaOver Al Apkudim, which is a remez to being passing through the Yamsuf. All to imply that this is the Gili of Kriyas Yamsuf. Trum El Hashem, which both empowers the Avodah and the end goal of the Avodah. At any rate, then was the other Shaila. He says, Machs HaShaka, before telling us what the shekel is. What was the answer to that? That's so clear. What's the answer in this Maimah to that? Why he says Machzis before telling us Machzis of what? Yeah, there was a vote at the end like that. He simply answered in the very beginning that Machs HaShekel is the avodah with half the person. Never Shabbamis. At the end was a vote that Machs HaShekel is Kabbalah Soil and Blikvul, which at least I'm not clear on how that's conveyed. And then the Shaila was, he starts with a Yitnu, and then after explaining what the Machs HaShekel is, he repeats again, Machs HaShekel Truma Lahavaya. So here at least explained the meaning of Truma Lahavaya. It seems here that the second reference to the word Machs HaShekel, that's the avodah of Kabbalah's oil. Kabbalah's oil that he says in the end is a blikvul avodah that leads to Truma Lahavaya. That's the last words of the Maimon. Machs HaShekel Truma Lahavaya Shnas Adom Valiyah Gam B'Nefesh Elikis. So the final Machs HaShekel, that's them, sorry. The first reference to Machs HaShekel is Nefesh Bahamis. The final reference is the Aliyah that Truma Lavai, the Avodah with Nefesh Bahamis pales in the Nefesh Elikis. That's the Nakud of the whole Maimon. The Nakud of the whole Maimon is that Afapi, the Bechitzonius, the Nefesh Elikis comes down in Misakin, the Nefesh Bahamis. But the whole point is that it gains the Aliyah. So he begins the whole Avodah by saying that for Superkei Chasher. He quotes the Gemara. Moishe Rabbeinu asked the Eibishter. Let's just go through this Befen Kloli. He starts saying that the whole Avodah is in your Kloli. Where do we see it's Kloli? Where do we see that it's with Sumiran Asay Tov? Are you with me? Sumiran Asay Tov. Lo Yibem Negef Sumiran Asay Tov is Kisisa. The Gemara says that Moshe wanted to know how will I lift the prestige of Eden. He told him Kisisa, and that's Asay Tov. So that B'chalolos is not just Sumiran Asay Tov, but Nefesh Abam is Nefesh Likis. So through the Avodah, with the Nefesh Bahamis, this pales an Aliyah into the Kisisa. That's the Zeh Yitnu, it's revealed, that the Avodah with the Nefesh Bahamis, as a Koiches, which leads to, I just mentioned, Kisisa. To understand this in more greater detail, and that's the whole theme of the Maimon. So first he introduces that the immediate Shodesh of Nefesh Elikis and Nefesh Bahamis are the different Shemus, namely, anyone? Shemban and Shema, and what's what? Right. Gematria Adam, Gematria Behim. How does it seen also? What does it mean? Pasha the Shema. What does it mean? Just literally. How we get the name 45 and the name Ban? It's a gematria, 45 and 52. It's a different milui of Shem Havaya, Shem Ba'etzem. It's a different milui. So if it's a milui of Hey, which is Malchus, that's Shem Ban. That's the avoid of the matter. The milui with an Aleph, Mashpia Zoh, it's the Maila Shem Ban. Now, the Zion Shemus and the Svidis, and the Zion Shemus themselves are the Chitzonius HaKelim, and Shemavai is the Pnimius HaKelim. Pnimius means self, Chitzonius means Zulas, other. So that's the Shorish, the Meshalikis, Nefesh Bahamis. Nefesh Elikis is the essential self, Nefesh Bahamis is the world, is what Nefesh Elikis is invested to be Mevadir. So, in other words, you're saying here that the Nefesh Elikis like Shem Havaya, and the Nefesh Bahamis is associated with the other Zion Shemus. Chitzonius HaKelim. Shem Havaya, we said, is Pnimius HaKelim, right? It's the Keich HaGvul as it's Nichlal in a Likus, Shlemus of a Likus. So, likewise in Torah, you have the two inyonim of Ma and Ban. And that's B'chlolas Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. But B'prati is even Torah Shebal Peh itself. It is Nigla and Galia and Pnimius. Galia would be what? The Mata Shemban and Pnimius HaTorah is Shemban. Just like we said, that the Avoid with Nefesh Baham is Shemban. Is Pearls and Aliyah Kisisa in the Nefesh Elikis. Likewise in Torah. Through the Birur of Halachas, Lamata, Dafke Nigla, is Pearls and Aliyah and Torah Lamaila. Chavedi, Makshivim Malakayla, the Basti Lagani themes. The Malachim come to hear Torah being not just discussed, but the Maskona, the Rotz and Eliyah, reveal Dafke Lamata. And there was a beautiful medrash that explained that Moishe Rabbeinu saw after it's Matan Torah, Tachas Raglav Kamaisa Livnas Hasapir Ketz Meshamayim L'Toya. Beneath his feet are bricks as opposed to stones. Bricks are man-made. So we're talking about Torah L'Mayla. Torah L'Mayla is fashioned by the Maskonis and the Avodah and the Birur that happens Dafka L'Mat. The bricks, Chaymer Levenim, the mortar, Kal V'Chaymer Levenim, the Ben Hilchasa, as explained in Chassidus. That's the outline. Now, Ois Gimel was the Bira Inyan. What was the Bira Inyan? So we just said that Shemban, Shemban is similar to Shem Havaya, Pnimius, and that's the other Shem is Chitzonius. So this will be understood by understanding Achlal the Inyan of Oisius, because Shem Havaya also has Oisius. And the other names also have Oisius. So what's the difference? So B'chlal, he says, Oisius HaKelim. So what's the mile of the Oisius of Shem Havaya? Pnimius HaKelim. They're not nifred min ha'oir. The oir is not mislavish in something outside of it. Later he elaborates, this is Oisius HaChkika. Oisius that are miyuchad min ha'etzem. Oisius that come in the parallel of a nefesh adam with the seichel. So they're not miling. And it's not something else. So the Oisius obviously make it seer in the oil, like in the Nimshal. You think of the idea when it occurs to the person. He has it in the Oisius, but it's not. It's all inside the oil. It's not never containing the idea; it's expressing the idea. Chitzonius HaKelim is already something else from the oil, and here you'd use it to megal the thing into something else, and the moshel is the Oisius that come together with the brikas, the skiris haseichel. The brikas is again the flash, and the skira means that overview. Skira means an overview. What's the chochma bekitzer, as opposed to the Oisius that the Rabbi uses to explain it to a Talmud. So explains that these Oisius that come together with the the emergence of the idea, you can't change them. Later he adds, you could, but if you do, it's a compromise of the oil. You kind of go back to the original, not the epiphany, but the original ISIS that you thought came up spontaneously. With the idea, you can go to that level and find a few scant words. You don't have whole sentences there and you have a few words, you have a few ISIS. You could decide to change that, but that's going to compromise the purity of the original idea. Don't tamper, you could tamper, but don't. Because they were spontaneous and they were megala mitzadarotz and nefesh. They were megala the appropriate ISIS that the oil needs. And if you play with it, you've lost it. The parallel is in Teresh B'Ksav. Don't tamper with it. If you do, you've changed. You've changed the whole lineage. Because the ISIS achkikya, the ISIS that come with the etzem oil. Masha'en came when you're being masbirit. So then the ISIS are not so negay at all. They're for the Zulus. And they can be different and they don't really change the content. Like the Rosh and the Ran, one svara, but different ISIS. So like with Teresh B'Ksav, so we went to the whole arichas first of all without going to, without repeating that each ois, its picture and form conveys what kind of gilui. Aleph, a yud l'mayla, yud l'mata, and the kav in the middle, which means two things. It gives two biyurim. Chach b'yalav, chach mitata, and the vav is tiferes. Another explanation, another dargin ois aleph is that the bottom one is not a yud but an inverted dalid. That's malchus. So here we have the amshacha from where? From Chochmah to Malchus. The nice base is a kav l'maylan, a kav l'matan, a kav, and then a kav in the middle to unite them. That's bina, and the bottom one is Malchus, and the vertical line is Tiferes, which joins bina Malchus. Then is Gimel, is a vav and a yud. That's Yisoid by being mashpia to Malchus. The Gemara says, explaining the Gemara actually explains the meaning of the letters. Aleph, teach, base, bias, gimel, dalit, gemel, dalim, bestowed to the poor, the recipient, that's malchus. And the yud below is the tzimtzum, not the yud like chachma is a big giloy, bittel. Here it's small, but not because of its nullified to the bittel, it's small because of the tzimtzum, which explains between gimel and vav. A vav is also a yud, and a vav in a line. There it's at the head, because there it's in the Nakuda Yud, but here in the Gimel it's below, because by Vav it's Chachma, as it's drawn down, but the Yud of Gimel is also Yud, but it's the Tzimtzum after the complete Ashpah is done. Likewise, all the Oisias, the Tmuna, the picture is all describing the Gilead. This is only Geoni Teresh B'Ksav. Because why? Because these Oisias are Megal the Oir. Oisias Atzmir. And the Mechubah believe hefsek, and therefore we have to have them written perfectly, and they have to be surrounded and separated. They have to be all the parts of the letters have to be joined, and they cannot be tampered with. The Mechodim with the Oir. Teresh B'al Peh, again, the particular Oisias choice of words are not negeya. And all these diyukim and respect for the letters do not apply in Teresh B'al Peh. But then comes the question, and he was a big part of the Maimed, so you would think therefore that the higher Oisias, Teresh B'Ksav, would be Megala, the Ratz and Chachma Hashem more than Teresh B'Ksav, and more than Teresh B'al Peh. The reality is it's not so. We don't understand anything in Teresh B'Ksav. After Teresh B'al Peh. What's the Nakud of the answer? The answer is because the Oisias there are not Magdal. The Oisias there, the Koyach HaGvul there, the Shleimus of Alikus. That's totally beyond. It's a Likus. It's Herzach. That the Eibishter is Magal himself in Oisias. But that's a marker self-called for Gvul that we can relate to, but it's totally unrelated to. Gvul we relate to is the Chsaron of Gvul, the Gbola Gvul, not the Maila Gvul. The whole of, huh? Exactly. It's what? It's master because it's too great. It's too great. It's not like, oh, take away the Oisius, now we get it. No. The Oisius haven't. Oisius together with Oyer, it's one thing. The whole thing is totally beyond us. So the Eibishter wants that there should be Gvul Mamish that we can relate to. And by definition, that means lower, further, finite. And then be Megal that what is this? This is the Keichak Gvul of Elikus. It's no less divine than the greatest Gilead, but that is thousands of years of working on that. So I give the whole moshel of Mispah, numbers. Mispah being Oisius. So sometimes we say a bigger number is what? Is higher. Bigger number is lower. That it is. We're speaking about the Oir, Mispah or Oiris, which is a borrowed term. We don't mean numbers, the numbered sense. We just mean big. The higher you go, Meya is Keser, etc. And the Elef, and then the Revova. The higher you go in this number, we're speaking about Oir is what? A higher Gila. But mitzad the kelim is the opposite. The higher you go, the kelim become more and more obtruse, less and less and less, and therefore not conveying anything with great difficulty. We see this also in the Nefesh Adam, to convey a very deep feeling, etc., even a very deep idea in its purity. There's poetry for that, and Oisius, which are subtle. And true poetry really is a spontaneous, the true poet. You know, he's in touch with a very deep place of creativity, and these words just come. Not he has an idea, now I'm going to find a rhyme for it. Poetry is not a rhyme. Rhyme is a cute. You have an idea, now I'm going to make it sound cutesy. True poetry is a creative expression, and the more profound the poetry, the more the listener has to try and unravel all of this. It's not communicating in a simple way. Much more subtle kelim, the miyuchad with the oil. And the true poet, he has this idea that the words just flow. So they claim, no, it is so.
Everything rooted in the pressure of the sound that's already there. I'm not saying this is only just mushroom poetry. Have many meanings, so that's part of that.
Sure it is.
But in terms of the sound, the halacha is already mentioned the same.
It's all in a latent, unarticulated way. We have to megala through all the kashas and learning, etc. So it's all there. It's all there. Like we said there yesterday, the Rambam. The Rambam was not consciously aware of the diyukim, the chidushim conveyed by his words. But his words are amitim and megala oir and chachmas Hashem. So latently, through development, they yield a tremendous a dearth of knowledge, and still hasn't finished yet.
So not the result, but the means, the development to get to that result. That's this Yerida, that's this goal we're talking about.
We are in this place, and we have to work through backwards to megala what the gila here is, what the chachmas, what the ratzon is. Yeah. Are we saying the same thing? It's all present. In the Teresh Ksav, it's all there latently. The Ratzon and the Chacham Hashem. What to do down to the Prati, but not articulated. It's all in a cloud form. Cloud. Potential. And through Avodah, we are Megalit. The Lamata Lamaila. Learning and Kashas and Aminu. That's the whole point of the Maimon. Through the avodah of Nefesh Bahamis, it's Megala, the latent keichas of the Nefesh Alikis is exactly the same Likud. The latent gewaldige keichas of the Nefesh Alikis has, which is what? There should be in a guf lamata and still remain connected, and on the contrary, be connected even deeper down here than Nefesh Alikis was Lamaila. This atzmis dike, incredible keich that it has, doesn't come to the fore unless it comes to the mat and it's challenged. So the deepest levels of Torah expressive suggested Dafke Minhagi Yisrael. Dafke Minhagi. The Dafke Kam Lamata. And the born of Golus, Minhagim are born of Golus, born of all of the travails of the Neshama being Lamata. That's where the Minhagim are born. Dafke in these places. Malachim, no clue. At midnight, like, wow, what is this? Never mind Minhagim. Piskei Dinim, Halachas, heaven is constantly, trumped by the Bezdin Lamata. They come to listen. Though it's all potential, it's completely lost on them. The Atzmizdike, Rots in the alien is Dafkim, Pratim, that's contained in the Koyach HaGvul and potential. All they see is the Koyach HaGvul, Shleimus Evalikus. But really, it's much more than that. The Shleimus Evalikus is, but that million Pratim in Kima Mitzvahs Lamata. That's not articulated. The Pel Mamish of it. What's will the Eibishter? And where are you going to find him? Not articulated to the Torah. Send down Lamata to us and the Guf and the Eitzahara. And here's where the whole debate happens in Beis Medrash and the Tanoim and Amaroim, etc. And then it's Megal the Rots in the Aliyah. Pardon? What? It's an ongoing process. Yeah, that's why, as we said, especially we see this in Chassidus, that Erev Geul and Bambish, a whole lot of details start emerging. It all in Pratim, in Torah mitzvahs, and also like it was in Limud Torah. We see this, big in the Rebbe's in Yon. But B'chlal, person learns properly. There's diyukim and diyukim, which are much more subtle and nuanced than previous generations. You see the whole say, the Mishnah, for the time of Zman HaMishnah, they learned the Mishnah was very clear. The klal was there, the discussion was over in 5 minutes. Came the Gemara, more pratim, then there's goyim, rishonim, achlonim, and the same word in the Mishnah yields a whole debate. It's all part of the Ratzon Eliyim that as we get closer and closer, dirib tachtonim, more and more tachton. What's the gather of tachton? Is chalkus and pratim. I told you this story, we'll repeat it again, because it's very instructive. One of the stories that like a really classic that always good to know and to share. The Moishe with the very big kids of the kid that was a very gifted child, and he was growing up, no one could best him. He just was cleverer than his teachers, etc. So his father trying to find a way to humble the child in a very unhealthy way to grow up. She brings him to the Alter Rebbe. You remember the story? Maybe you don't know it. So the Alter Rebbe says to him how to learn. He says, no, he knows how to learn. Yeah, a 10-year-old kid. She takes out a Gemara, opens at the back, points to a Rosh. Learn it. 2 minutes, he learned the Rosh. Okay, go. So the Rosh makes sense. The Rosh is a Pesach. And he passes it in based on the Gemara there. He says, it's a Shvach HaRaya. He says, yeah, it's a Shvach HaRaya. Alter Rebbe proceeds to bring 10 Rayas and all over Shas, much stronger than the Rosh. With each Raya that he brings, he says to the child, you ask him? Kid says, yes. You have to be a genius to follow the Alter Rebbe's. Don't pull him. And then the Alter Rebbe proceeds to dismantle every one of those 10 pilpulim. After each counter upshlag, he says to the child, you ask him, you've demolished that Raya. All the 10 Rayas, the only Raya that remains, that's not so earth-shattering, but cannot be demolished, is the Raya that the Rosh brings. The Rebbe concludes, he says 2 things to him. He says, you don't know how to learn. All you do is agree with me. So they're already deflated him. He brought him 10 Rayas and 10 Rayas. But Yikah was what he said further. This, to give him Yirah Shemayim, right, to approach learning. He says, you think the Rosh went through this whole process? He didn't. Right away. This was the instinctual. This is the halacha. Here's the Raya. Gamal. Lama Dova Doima. It's very instructive. To what can that be compared? A person in a dark, unfamiliar room, pitch black. Imagine being in this room, trying to get out. First, we're going to go here. Oh, it feels like a door. It's a Raya, an indent. No. Then we go to that. Oh, here, bigger Raya, because your hand goes all the way, and there's a frame. But then we hit the window. It's not a door. Then we come to cupboard. Oh, bigger Raya. Because here, before there wasn't a handle. Here is a handle, and we put our hand in through the hand, but then we try to go through. No. Then we hit that door. It's the mamisha door. But then it takes us to another room. And so through the process of trial and error, finally, the person will, he starts here, starts literally tapping a vent. He'll end up by that door and get out. What if the light is on? Unfamiliar room. Someone puts the light on, there's the door, out he goes. So for the Rishonim, door was an uncomplicated matter. Not a door compared to a window, compared to a cupboard, compared to an indent in a. Few words about the door, Gaman. Later generations, what is the door? It's a whole book. What is the door is? But that's the Ratzon Elyon. Is that the Ratzon, the mitzvah being discussed should penetrate the pratim of Elam Hazeh, of the way the mind works and everything else in contrast. That's part of the B'tachtonim. Which is why some Bavli Yerushalmi is the same thing. Similar. Yerushalmi, the discussion is very brief. Allah. When there's Machlekes Bavli and Yerushalmi, like Bavli. Even though the Gemara says about Bavli, but Machashak and Meshivani, that's where the Mashal comes from. You place me in darkness, Zutam with Bavli. Because every conclusion is through a whole process of going through trial and error and darkness. But Allah is Davke like Bavli. Allah is like the later Rishon. Because at the end of the day, he doesn't see it. But who has a deeper understanding and who has brought down this, the Ratzon, the Elyon, addressing, respecting and addressing all the pratim of the world in a more developed and pneumistic way, Stavka the what? Bavli, both in Rishon, Davka the Rishon, Davka the Achim. Therein lies the Ratzon Elyon in a deeper way. Even the Mitzat Oyin experience, the earlier generations saw the light. But the appreciation of what this light is, and who's appreciating it? The Seichel, the labyrinth of Seichel, and in the Pratim, and the application in Pratim, it's Dafka our world. Could actually, you had something else that's going? Yeah, they're going to call this more experiencing or seeing. Yeah, in Seich, Moishe Bein, his dark is what he experienced. I want to bring out is this idea of really it's klal or prat. Starts off klal and the klal breaks down, greater pratim. This is true of everything, the neshamas. Originally, Abishah conceived of neshamas. Originally, all of Machshav, it's one neshama. It's breaking down into smaller and smaller parts. So we're very small, the etzem is present in all of them. But our lives are much more. A Poshat the Shaila. In the time of the Mishnah, they didn't articulate what about this case. So how do people behave? What did they do? So they just lived. Life was just not that specific. First of all, the tefillin didn't have that doesn't go so back to far as the Mishnah, even before the Alter Rebbe, just didn't have the detail that Arizal added. Didn't have it. But even here in the Pratim, it's going to do it one way or do it another way. So first of all, there is the actual detail in the mitzvah that just didn't have, that emerges later. But secondly, when it came to a crossroad that later is a machlekes, later becomes a machlekes, it's whatever the person was inclined. Naturally, the way it did was a shaila. Later becomes a debate, but this way or that way. Why wasn't that a debate before? They didn't need that debate. The neshamas are more klali, and both ways were equally valid. Now that the Dira B'tachtonim progresses and the world is descending and becoming more fragmented, now it becomes necessary to debate the question, this way or that way. What's the avodah now? Then it could tolerate either way. It was lo meshaneh. Now, because Dira B'tachtonim, is it Hillel, is it Shammai, is it Chesed, is it Gevurah? Now the questions become relevant. Didn't have those questions. Going back at 200 years, a person's sphere of influence and relationship with the world was how many things? How many things in place that he connected? It's a very simple, not. The phone here has millions of parts that come from all over the world. Fragments and fragments and fragments are part of our world all the time. Why? Because the B'tachtonim is to be mevada the Nitzutzik Dushi and the fragments, pratim, they're all coming to our doorstep. In your phone, in your car. It's from every place in the world and thousands of people involved in it. Nitzutzik Dushin, details and pratim. He milked his cow, he had milk in a bucket. There was 5 things he was elevating. You drink your milk, you're right there. It's the whole world is involved in this cup, literally. And the milk too, because the machinery, they milk the cow and the coffee. Why? Because now the end, before Mashiach comes, the Neshama is all of us. It's hashgacha pratis. It's mind-boggling to consider how Hashem has orchestrated all this. Whatever comes in your hand, and it's so many pratim. It's because now is the time for this from all over the world to receive its elevation and be used in Avodas Hashem. So this whole idea of details and details and details that make up our life, it's all part of the Dira B'tachtoin. And to thread it all with oneness, that's the whole point of it all. Not yet entangled. Okay, let's move quickly to the Chazorah. So this is the between Atzilus and Biyah. They say, Yev Chaye Echad, Yev Gamay Echad. Shenkin in Biyah, there's the Pratim and the Levushim become Chitzonius. The Levushim and Atzilus, but the Meyuchadim. But then Atzilus Gufa, the lowest sphere is already Shayich. Shayich, the only reason there are the lowest spheres is because it's going to be a Biyah and the Lamhaza and the Tachten. So therefore, in Netzachayt v'Yesod and Malchus emerge, and therefore they are one. He described them. Therefore, Shem Tzvaka is just an Izvav. Shem Tzvaka is, even though it's Zayin Shem Shenim Chokim, but it's where it's expressive of Netzach v'Hoid, which are in Atzilus, but the name only emerges where Zman and Nevi'im. You only need a Netzach v'Hoid because it's going to be a Milchama and a Zman and Nevi'im and a tremendous Yidid. Shenkin Moshe Rabbeinu, you learned in the previous Amarim, Zman Moishe Yichud Yilah, and the Milchamas happen by themselves, not a whole investment. The Milchamas are miraculous. So Noisvavi added, and that's the whole, so this is the whole kavanah, to go down from the Pnimis Hakim, the Chitzenis Hakim, and then to Biyad, and to the Vushim, and then Maza, Mayofa Pamayich, Bana Olim, Dafka through the beard of the Nefesh Bahamis, the Naolim, Behema, it's referring to Aliyah Regel, Kishem Shebal Yirois, Kach Bal Yirois, like he's seen totally, there he sees Alikus is fully revealed there through the Havayda Vot, Mayofa Pamayich Ben Olim. If you speak too generally, because all the pratim over here. It was interesting in the Kudi of Tzav, of Keil Adna is Begimatri Tzav, and Tzav is associated with Avodah Zarah. They need a tziv in order to combat Avodah Zarah. The fact that it's a Gematria can actually, how does it come to Shem Keil Adnai? The teretz is because that's the kavanah is to combat Avodah Zarah, and it starts with the Tzimtzum. Most Jews Avodah Zarah, but he says, yeah, it's missing they're not Eretz Yisrael, and you start to give shivas to Dvarim Gashmim, that's already B'Tahara, very dakasdik already Avodah Zarah, which could lead to actual Avodah Zarah. So why are we here? We're thrust into this. Shem Keil Adnai is Begimatri Tzav, to know that's Dafka in this Mulchama and in this victory, in this transformation, that happens, the true Aliyah, and the Aliyah, even in Shemai, the Aliyah, even in Nefesh Alikis, the Aliyah, even where in Torah, for Torah itself. Trum Malavaya, at the end, referring to Nefesh Alikis, the Kisisa. So Yitnu, you said before, in the beginning of the Chazor today, Sekelev Yam Vehu, Gil Atzmos Lamato, that's the empowerment, A and B, the end result. And the Rishonis, we mentioned the Shaykhs to Kriya Samsov, the Machzah Shekel. Okay, again, this is no substitute for Chazorah, but general overview.